Hey guys, tonight we drift into the swirling mists of myth and memory, where the world is still young and the gods meddle freely in mortal affairs. You're not on solid ground anymore, you're on the edge of ancient Thessaly, at a time when just being born could doom you to a life of war, glory, and, well, a violently short retirement. You're staring up from a stone cradle, and there's a nymph standing over you with haunted eyes. This is your first memory, cold fingers and river spray. Your mother, Thetis, yes, that Thetis, sea goddess and occasional shapeshifter, is holding you upside down by your ankle. She's wading into the dark, rippling waters of the river Styx, whispering prayers only the dead should hear. And then, in you go. She dunks you like an overripe mango into water colder than Neptune's own bathtub. But here's the tragic punchline. One tiny bit of you doesn't get soaked. That heel, that soft, innocent little heel she's holding on to. Historians still argue whether Thetis forgot, panicked, or just didn't think about the whole full immersion part. Either way, congratulations, you're now 99% invulnerable. Except, you know, where it counts, so you survive your first dip into death water. Barely a week old, and already you're a walking prophecy. A seer declares that your life will be short but glorious, and everyone nods solemnly, while probably hoping you take up accounting instead of war. Thetis isn't thrilled with your destiny. She married a mortal, Peleus, against her will. That's another complicated story involving Zeus and a very awkward wedding. And now she is terrified you lions end up just like every other mortal, dead and boring. So she starts doing what any overprotective mom with divine powers might, testing unconventional baby care methods. One version of the myth says she sneaks into your room at night and tries to burn away your mortal parts over a sacred fire. Another says she dips you in ambrosia. You cry. Peleus screams. Thetis gets dramatic and leaves forever. So that's how you end up half mortal, half god, all trouble. You grow fast, maybe too fast. 1 minute you're gnawing on figs, the next you're punching your tutors. So Peleus ships you off to a cave on Mount Pelion prime real estate for ancient Greek childcare. That's where you meet your next father figure, Chiron the centaur. Now, don't picture a wild party horse. Chiron is classy. He reads philosophy, brews herbal teas, and somehow makes being half horse seem incredibly respectable. He trains heroes for a living. Hercules, Jason, Perseus, you're just his latest high-maintenance client. Life under Chiron is strange but peaceful. You wake with the mist, chase deer barefoot across stone, and learn to stitch wounds while humming lullabies in dead languages. You learn how to read the stars and hit a target by listening to the wind. Occasionally, you help mix a poultice out of owl feathers and morse. It smells terrible, but heals cracked skin like magic. There's a kind of rhythm here, and you almost forget you're destined to be a headline tragedy. You even start to enjoy the lectures. Chiron talks about moderation, virtue, music. He says things like a warrior is nothing without wisdom. While handing you a lyre, you strum a little, the strings hum, he nods. Somewhere in the distance, a deer snorts and runs. But just when you're restarting to feel like maybe you could live a quiet life, making goat cheese and playing music, something shifts. A messenger arrives. He's dusty, nervous, and he stares at you like you're already on a pedestal. A war is coming. Something about Helen of Troy, yes. That Helen and a whole bunch of O's and ships and angry kings. You're still a teenager, but people are whispering your name in royal courts. They're saying you're needed, and Thetis, she panics again. This time, she doesn't try fire or river water. No, she pulls a classic overcorrection. She dresses you up as a girl and hide you among the daughters of King Lycomedes on the island of Skyros. Honestly, it's not your worst disguise. You get a fancy dress, a new name, and the chance to blend in while learning embroidery and island politics. Historians still argue whether you hated it or secretly found it kind of refreshing. Fringe scholars even debate whether you fathered a child with one of the princesses Deda Maya during your stay. It's hard to keep track of what's myth and what's just awkward vacation drama, but it doesn't last. He shows up with a trunk full of gifts, perfume, silk, and one shiny sword. Guess who lunges for the sword before remembering your sash? Yep, the jig is up. The girls gasp. Odysseus smirks. You sigh. You're going to war. The ground feels different under your feet now. Heavier. Destiny isn't just a word anymore, it's a countdown. You're no longer just Achilles, son of Peleus. You're a name that armies will shout, a figure bards will exaggerate, and a teenager with a seriously questionable career plan. The wind off the sea picks up, curling around your ears like a warning. But hey, at least you're well dressed. The sails crack like thunder as your ship carves through the Aegean. You're perched near the bow, one leg dangling over the edge, watching the waves flash silver under a moody, sunless sky. Salt stings your face, and your thoughts drift back strangely, not to war, but to Chiron's cave. You remember his quiet voice echoing against the stone. A sharp mind must guide a strong hand. At the time, you were too busy stabbing pineapples with spears to care. Now, with Troy somewhere on the horizon, you wonder if you should have asked more questions about things like tactics or teamwork. But there's no going back. You're one of many ships, now a sea of them, really, over 1,000, depending on which poet you ask. Kings and soldiers from all over Greece, all following the call to reclaim Helen and punish Troy. And in the middle of it all, you, the teenage wildcard with the gods, watching his every move. Before you can even reach Troy, the war takes a detour. The fleet lands by mistake in Mysia, and you, being you, go full berserker on the local king's army. You're fast, unnaturally fast. It's like the battlefield bends around your feet. You kill one of Heracles' sons in the process, though, which causes a bit of a diplomatic spat. Just another Tuesday. Eventually, the ships regroup and make the proper landing near Troy, and the moment your foot hits Trojan soil, something clicks. The sand under your heel is dry and gritty, probably the only part of you still killable, but it doesn't matter. You're home, in a weird way. You were born for this. Your entrance is less subtle arrival and more divine announcement. You spear men through shields, leap over walls like it's gym class, and collect trophies faster than your shield bearer can keep count. The Greeks start whispering that you re not just a hero, you re a walking cheat code. You're not alone, though. You've got your elite squad, the Myrmidons, 1,000 hand-picked warriors from your dad's kingdom, all loyal, all scary, all wearing matching armor like some ancient Greek boy band. They follow you without question, and honestly, they should probably unionize. And then there's Patroclus. He's not just another soldier. He's a something else, your friend, your tether. The one person who can joke with you without getting skewered. You two grew up together under Chiron's roof, and while historians still argue whether it was a bromance, romance, or deeply codependent battle buddy thing, one thing's clear: you'd burn the world down for him. The early years of the war blur into a golden montage. Raids, ambushes, armor clanging in rhythm like music. You're unstoppable. You even get your own signature move, the spear toss followed by a midair double kill. It doesn't get you bonus points, but it does make you look very cool in oral poetry. Then comes the first big curveball, the plague, Apollo. god of sun and snark, is angry. Real angry. His priest's daughter has been kidnapped by Agamemnon, the Greek commander-in-chief and proud owner of a fragile ego. Apollo sends a plague that wipes out Greeks like spoiled hummus at a festival. People beg Agamemnon to return the girl. He grumbles, whines, and eventually agrees, but only if he can take your war prize, Briseis, in exchange. Oh, right, Briseis. She's a captured Trojan noblewoman. You took her during a raid, and, over time, something softened. Maybe it was respect, maybe guilt, maybe she reminded you of that life you almost had on Skyros, before swords and ships. Whatever it was, when Agamemnon takes her, you lose it. You withdraw from battle, publicly, loudly, pettily. You sit in your tent and sulk like only a demigod can sulk. You refuse to fight. You don't even respond to apologies or bribes. You write angry letters and play sad music on your lyre. Patroclus tries to cheer you up, but even he starts to get worried. And here's the kicker. The Greek army starts losing. Badly, turns out. Taking Achilles off the battlefield is like removing the batteries from a very angry god-powered toy. The Trojans, led by Prince Hector, aka the most honorable guy in the entire saga, start pushing the Greeks back toward the sea. Meanwhile, you're brooding. The sand around your tent becomes a sort of passive-aggressive moat. People avoid you. Even Odysseus, master negotiator and part-time babysitter for angry heroes, can't coax you back. You're nursing a grudge that's part pride, part heartbreak, and part maybe I actually hate this whole war thing. One day, as you're staring out at the sea, you hear faint sounds of battle getting closer, screams, harses, the clash of shields. You squint toward the horizon and see the Trojan army burning Greek ships. That's when the reality check hits. Your absence isn't just a dramatic choice, it's a catastrophe. But still, you refuse to fight. Even as the smoke curls into the sky and the Greeks fall one by one, you hold your ground. Because if Agamemnon can insult you and get away with it, then what's the point of glory? What's the point of being invincible if you're not respected? This is the part where Chiron would say something wise about pride being a heavier burden than armor. But Chiron isn't here, just Patroclus. And he's pacing outside your tent with a look that says, I love you, but you are being so difficult right now. Patroclus stares at you with that particular brand of frustration reserved for people who've had to listen to the same moody lyre song 12 nights in a row. He is gentle about it, he always is, but you can feel the tension simmering just beneath his voice. The camp is crumbling. Greeks are dying. The Trojans are practically doing donuts in the sand around the Greek ships. And you single quotes composing poetry about betrayal. He kneels beside you, quiet, careful, and then he says it. Let me wear your armor. You blink. It takes a second to process. His plan is bold and frankly insane. He wants to put on your unmistakable armor, ride out with the myrmidons, and pretend to be you, just long enough to scare the Trojans off and buy the Greeks a little time. You hesitate. Every part of you says no. But there's a crack in your armor, and it's not in the heel. It's in your heart. You can't stand watching Patroclus suffer. So you agree. You help him suit up. The armor fits him almost too well. Bronze greaves, lion-crested helmet, your unmistakable shield glinting like a second sun. The myrmidons gather, confused but loyal. You whisper warnings, don't chase them too far, just push them back. Patroclus nods like he's listening, but you both know he won't stop. He never could. And then they ride. The sight of your armor on the battlefield is like a thunderclap. The Trojans panic. They scream your name, Achilles. Achilles is back. and the tide turns. Greek morale snaps back like a whip. Chariots crash, spears fly, sand turns red. But then Patroclus makes a choice. He goes too far. Instead of returning after the push, he charges the city walls. And that's when he meets Hector. Now, Hector isn't like the others. He's no villain, no mad-eyed warmonger. He's a prince, a father, a man with too much honor and not enough rest. And when he sees Achilles tearing through the ranks, he does what he must. He fights. They clash, bronze rings, dust spirals. And Hector noble, deadly Hector kills Patroclus, not knowing, not realizing, not understanding until it's done. And your helmet rolls off your friend's head, revealing not Achilles, but the kind boy who once stitched a gash on your arm and made you laugh during a storm. The news doesn't come in like thunder. It creeps. It whispers. A Myrmidon survivor returns, eyes hollow, hands trembling, and tells you, he's gone. The world doesn't stop, but you do. You sit still 4 hours, maybe days. The fire in your chest is white hot and cold at the same time. You refuse food, refuse comfort. Thetis appears, brushing seaweed from her hair, and offers a new set of divine armor, fresh from Hephaestus's forge. You don't even look at it at first. All you can see is Patroclus's smile. The way his brow furrowed when you played a wrong note. The way he always stood half a step behind you, but never in your shadow. And you rage, not the loud, theatrical kind. Not yet. This is quiet, still, the kind that turns sand into glass. Historians still argue whether this moment is when Achilles becomes a god in spirit, if not in title. Something in you unravels, or crystallizes. Either way, you're no longer just a fighter, you're a storm. Thetis brings you armor anyway, because mothers know. It gleams with celestial patterns, the sun, the stars, the earth itself etched into the shield like a warning to anyone dumb enough to try you. It hums when you lift it. The sword sings when it moves. Even your horse seems to look at you with caution now, and so you rise. You step outside your tent. The camp hushes. Even the wind stills. Soldiers pass around you like reeds in a river. Your hair is unbound. Your eyes are hollow. And your armor catches firelight like prophecy. No one dares speak. No one dares follow. You walk alone to the sea and scream. The sound carries. Over hills, through camp, into Troy. Even the gods glance up from their thrones. You swear revenge, not just on Hector, on fate, on war, on everything that took Patroclus from you. That night, you finally eat, barely, just enough. You lay out Patroclus's body, swearing he'll not be buried until Hector lies dead beside him. The Myrmidons mourn in silence. You do not cry, not yet. But your hands tremble when you touch his hair, outside. The fire burns low. Inside, your heart begins to boil. In the morning, you will return to battle. Not as a soldier, not even as a hero, as wrath. The dawn arrives like a dare. The sky isn't pink or gold, it's grey, flat, and unbothered by your grief. You don't wait for prayers, speeches, or omens. You strap on your divine armor, and every piece feels heavier than it should, like it remembers Patroclus, too. Your chariot creaks under your weight. Your immortal horses, Xanthus and Balius, stamp their hooves as if they already know what's coming. You mutter something to them, something half-hearted and dark, and to everyone's surprise, one of them answers, yes, talks. Xanthus turns his head, mane flicking sparks, and says, "We'll carry you swiftly, Achilles, but your death draws near." Then he goes back to being a horse, because apparently prophetic animals don't take follow-up questions. You squint at him, then shrug, The battlefield greets you with confusion. The Greeks gape, the Trojans panic, and Hector, honorable, brave, probably tired Hector, hears your voice and knows the reckoning has begun. You don't enter the fight, you detonate into it. Spears bounce off your armor like twigs. You move faster than men can blink. Your sword arcs through the air like a beam of sunlight, and where it falls, silence follows. You're not fighting for the Greeks, you're fighting through them, cutting a path straight toward the Trojan walls. This isn't a skirmish, it's a statement. You kill so many men that even the river scamander tries to stop you. That's right, the river. The water rises, sentient and salty, sick of being clogged with corpses. It tries to drown you. You fight the river. Because that's your life now, swinging a sword at sentient geography. Fringe scholars have a field day with this one. Was the river literally angry? Symbolic? Did Achilles hallucinate the whole thing in a grief-fueled frenzy? Hard to say, but it definitely adds flavor to the mythos. Eventually, the gods intervene. Poseidon yells at the river. Hephaestus scorches the waters with divine fire. You drag yourself from the muck, soaked, bleeding, but unstoppable. You stagger toward Troy with the determination of someone who hasn't slept in days, and definitely isn't planning to. And then you see him, Hector. He's standing just outside the gates of Troy, sword in hand, face like a carved statue. He knows, you both know. The city behind him holds its breath. He runs, you chase, 3 times around the walls. That's how long it takes, 3 exhausting laps, with the people of Troy watching from above, and the gods whispering baits in Olympus. You could catch him, easily, but you wait. Maybe out of respect, maybe to prolong his fear, or maybe, deep down, you want him to earn it. Finally, Athena tricks him, appears in disguise, gets him to turn and fight. And that's all you need. You don't hesitate. Hector lunges, you dodge. You aim for the gap in his armor and drive your spear clean through. His eyes go wide. His knees buckle. He gasps your name with his last breath, not as a curse, but almost a farewell. You don't care. Your grief has calcified. You tie his body to your chariot and drag it, yes, really around the walls of Troy, over and over again. It's barbaric, it's shameful, and yet, no one stops you. Historians still argue whether this was vengeance or madness. Some say the gods wept, others say they turned away. All agree. This was the moment Achilles stopped being a hero and started becoming a legend. You return to camp, dust-caked and empty. You lay Patroclus's body beside Hector's. You sit for a while, just sit. The wall doesn't pause, but it slows. The Myrmidons keep their distance. Even Agamemnon leaves you alone. Eventually, you do the thing you swore you wouldn't. You give Patroclus a funeral. It's lavish, a pyre piled with gold and oil and tears you don't let anyone see. You shave your head. You slit the throats of 12 Trojan prisoners as offerings a bloody, awful tribute that future poets will either condemn or romanticize, depending on their vibe. And then you light the fire. The flames rise high enough to touch the stars. You watch until there's nothing left but ash. And still, it doesn't feel like enough. Later that night, Priam comes. Yes, King Priam, ruler of Troy, father of Hector, sneaks into your tent. No army, no weapons, just a trembling old man with grief on his breath. He falls to his knees before you. He kisses your hands. Give me my son's body. You freeze. It's not a trick, not a ploy. Just one father begging another killer for kindness. And somehow, something in you shifts. You remember Peleus. You remember the way Chiron taught you to hold a blade and a lyre, and so you soften. You lift Hector's body. You place it in Priam's arms. You tell him to eat, to rest, to grieve without shame. When Priam leaves your tent, the night feels different. Not lighter, no. That would be too easy, but quieter. The stars don't blink so fiercely. The sea, always lurking just beyond the camp, hushes its waves like it's eavesdropping on grief. You sit alone, the fire crackles, burning low. And for once, you're not thinking about killing someone, you're just tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that settles deep in your bones, in the part of you that knows you were never really meant to grow old anyway. The funeral games for Patroclus are held the next day. Yeah, because nothing says mourning like competitive sports. There's chariot racing, spear throwing, wrestling, and foot races because apparently no one can cry for too long without needing to punch something. You offer prizes, gold, horses, armor. People cheer, laugh, and for a brief moment, you remember how joy sounds. It's strange, like hearing your own name in a dream. You don't compete, you just watch. Odysseus wins a few events, of course he does. He cheats just enough to stay likable. Ajax grumbles about it, but takes his silver without too much fuss. Nestor, the oldest guy in the camp by a mile, gives a speech that takes half the day and includes references no one understands. It's exactly the sort of boring, gentle chaos Patroclus would have loved. You smile once, and then the games end, with Hector buried and Patroclus honored. The Greeks regroup. You're back to being the spearhead of the army, and this time, even Agamemnon knows better than to cross you. He returns Briseis without a fuss and offers more treasures than you can carry. You nod, accept, but the glow is gone. Something inside you isn't quite as sharp anymore. Still, you fight. You push the Trojans back. Day after day, battle after battle, you're not chasing glory now, you're chasing completion. Like someone finishing a half-read book they no longer love. Troy holds, barely, but the walls are cracking. Supplies are low, hopes are lower. And then Paris gets brave. Paris, yes. That Paris, the pretty boy archer, whose whole resume is basically caused the war by stealing someone else's wife. He's been quiet lately, lurking in the background. But he still has a bow, and he still has Aphrodite on speed dial. The gods have been getting restless again. Some support Troy, others back the Greeks, and a few just like watching things burn. They're moving pieces on the board, whispering to mortals, stacking the odds. And in some divine brainstorming session, someone decides it's time. Paris takes up his bow. Some say Apollo guides his hand. Others say it was sheer luck. All we know is that one morning, in the chaos of yet another battle, you charge forward unstoppable, magnificent, radiant in that god-forged armor. And then something stings. Just above your heel, you stumble. You shouldn't stumble. You collapse. You shouldn't collapse. The arrow isn't big. It doesn't glow. It doesn't sing with divine energy. It's small, almost unimpressive. But it slips through the one place Thetis couldn't protect. And in that instant, everything unravels. You fall. Some say you don't cry out. Others swear they heard you whisper Patroclus's name. Either way, your body hits the dirt like thunder. The battle freezes, Myrmidons scream, the Trojans blink, and Paris. He probably gets a confused high five from some lesser god. Your death ripples outward. Ajax, your towering friend, fights like a man possessed to protect your corpse. He lifts you like a fallen statue and carries you back to camp. He doesn't stop fighting until his sword is red and the earth itself seems to lean away. Historians still argue whether you truly died then, or lingered long enough for a few last words. Fringe versions of the myth say Thetis tried to bargain for your soul. Others say you smiled, finally free of fate. But the common thread, you died, not in a blaze of glory, but from a wound no bigger than a thumbprint. Because destiny has a sense of humor. Back at camp, the Greeks are stunned. Even Agamemnon, who once stole your girl and half your patience, weeps openly. Odysseus quietly takes command, because someone has to, and Ajax, he starts to unravel. You were his friend, his brother in arms, his measuring stick for everything that mattered. And now he's watching priests prepare your body for burning, while whispers fly about who'll get your armor. Yes, your armor, because apparently nothing is sacred for long. A contest is held to decide who gets it, Ajax or Odysseus. You'd think the massive, unbreakable warrior who carried your body through fire would get it, right? Nope. Odysseus talks better, wins the vote, takes the armor. Ajax breaks, literally. He falls into a rage, then a silence, then a spiral. He wanders off into the dark, his sword dragging behind him, and never comes back. Another course. Your body, meanwhile, is given the kind of send-off that turns into legend. The Greeks burn you on a massive pyre, mix your ashes with Patroclus's, and bury the urn on a promontory overlooking the sea. A shrine is built, offerings are made. Songs are sung, you're gone, but somehow more present than ever. You don't get a tombstone, you get eternity. You may be dead, but you're not done. The winds howl across the plain, carrying your name like a rumor the world refuses to let go of. Achilles, the Greeks whisper it in their tents. The Trojans mutter it in fear. Even the gods seem quieter now, as if something essential has exited the stage and left them blinking in the limelight. But of course, this is mythology. Dying is never just dying. Thetis rises from the sea again, this time not in panic, but in sorrow. She retrieves your bones, what little the fire left behind, and demands a proper resting place. Your ashes are mixed with Patroclus's, because you asked. Because no one ever doubted how deeply the two of you were bound. Together in death, just as you were in life. A great burial mound is raised on a headland by the Hellespont. It catches the morning sun and watches over the sea like a bronze sentinel. Greek ships pass by and toss reeds into the water. Some soldiers swear they hear your laughter on the wind, or feel a cold breeze just as they draw their swords. Ajax's blood is still drying in the sand. Yes, he killed himself. Plunged his sword into the very earth he fought to protect. Some say it was shame over losing your armor. Others say it was grief, the kind that no wine or war can drown. The gods don't intervene. Not for him. Not now. Odysseus, meanwhile, carries on. He's clever, yes. But even he knows there's a hole in the camp that can't be filled, not with words, not with plans. He polishes your armor and doesn't wear it right away. Maybe he's afraid. Maybe he just respects the weight. As for the war, it drags, because of course it does. With you gone, the Greeks lose momentum, morale slips, the Trojans push back. And for a while, it feels like the war might just fizzle. 10 years of blood and sand, ending not with victory, but a tired shrug. Until someone gets an idea. Build a horse, a giant horse. You're not around to veto it, which is a shame, because let's be honest, if you were, you would have laughed your bronze-plated head off, but they build it anyway. Hollow it out, stuff it with warriors, present it as a gift. The Trojans debate 4 hours. Scholars still argue about how anyone thought this was a good idea, and eventually, The horse is wheeled inside. Night falls. The warriors sneak out. And Troy burns. But you don't see it. Not really. Because by now, you're somewhere else. Somewhere beneath the earth. In the shadowy realm of Hades. It's not fire and brimstone, more like fog and silence. Fields of asphodel stretch endlessly. Souls wander, forgetful and faded. Heroes lounge, bored. There's no joy here, no rage. Just a dull ache of memory. You walk the meadows in silence. Sometimes alone, sometimes alongside Patroclus. You don't speak much. There's not much to say. But then something unusual happens. Odysseus visits, long after the war. He makes his way to the underworld in search of prophecy, guidance whatever half-mad wanderers crave. He sees your shade, calls your name, and what do you say? You don't brag, don't boast. You just sigh and tell him that you'd rather be a poor farmer alive on earth than rule over all the dead. Because that's the truth of it, isn't it? Glory docenti feels so glorious when you rewatching centuries slip past like raindrops on glass. Historians love this moment. They write essays about it. Is it humility, regret? A critique of the warrior code. No one agrees, but everyone remembers the quote, even dead, you still get the best lines. Back among the living, your legend explodes. Poets make you taller, faster, angrier. Artists paint you as a god of vengeance, all shining bronze and wine-swept hair. Philosophers debate your choices, your honor, your sulking. You become the blueprint for every tragic hero to come. Even Alexander the Great, centuries later, visits your tomb and weeps. He leaves an offering, a wreath, maybe a whispered promise. Because he, too, wants to be remembered the way you are, forever young, forever burning. Your mother Thetis fades back into the waves. The gods stop mentioning your name quite so often. The war becomes a story, the story becomes a song, and the song, it drifts from campfire to classroom, twisted and retold, always with one foot in truth and the other in myth. Your heel, your infamous, traitorous heel becomes shorthand for weakness. Your rage becomes legendary. And somewhere, in the Elysian fields, or maybe just in the memory of humanity itself, you linger. Not a ghost, not quite a god, but a name, Achilles. The fire's gone out. The armor's been passed on, the ashes have cooled, but the idea of you, Achilles, the golden boy of death and destiny, refuses to leave the stage. Back in the mortal world, the storytellers can't help themselves. They pick you apart, like scholars analyzing a lion's roar. Homer starts it, of course. The Iliad, a name dropped in more classrooms than lunch trays. Isn't he even about the whole Trojan War? Just a slice of it. Just your sulking, your rage, and the carnage it causes. And yet, somehow, that's enough to immortalize you better than Ambrosia ever could. But the story doesn't stop there. No. The ancient Greeks, being the original cinematic universe builders, start expanding the lore. More poets jump in. Some write prequels. Others write sequels. And a few get weird. There's a whole epic, now lost, that claimed you ended up in the White Island, a mythical paradise in the Black Sea, where fallen heroes chill in beachfront retirement. Historians still argue whether this was a serious belief or just fan fiction with a toga on. Fringe accounts even claim you married Helen there. Yep, that's Helen, the same one who started the whole mess. Apparently, death makes everyone a little more forgiving. Your name becomes shorthand for unstoppable force. Parents start naming their kids after you: Achilles, Achilles, even Achilleos if they're feeling fancy. And your heel, it gets its own fame. Medicine names a tendon after it. Coaches use it in metaphors. Screenwriters abuse it with glee. You, my friend, are a metaphor now, an anatomical warning label. Meanwhile, Rome picks up your torch. They love a tragic Greek. Virgil, in his Aeneid, has his hero, Aeneas, visit the underworld too. And guess who shows up? You, still brooding, still pacing those gloomy fields. Aeneas tries to talk to you, but you're not in the mood. You've got this whole eternal restlessness aesthetic going. Roman generals start comparing themselves to you, to those most wisely skip the part where you die young and dramatically. Then the Renaissance happens. Painters can't get enough of you. You show up on chapel ceilings, palace walls, and tavern signs. You're always mid-swing, muscles like marble, with one tasteful curl out of place, and always that glint in your eye, like you're halfway through a dramatic monologue about glory and heartbreak. Shakespeare name drops you. Opera composers score you. Even Freud gets involved digging around in your psyche for unresolved maternal tension and daddy issues with divine implications. Fringe psychologists treat your name a diagnosis. Ah yes, classic Achilles complex. Whatever that means. And let's not forget the museums. Armor that might have belonged to someone like Achilles is encased in glass and admired by schoolchildren eating fruit snacks. Scholars debate whether the blade you said to have carried could even be lifted by mortal hands. Spoiler, it couldn't. But does it stop anyone from trying to recreate it in video games? Nope. Modern pop culture gives you another round of fame. You're recast, reimagined, rebooted. You show up with new accents, new motivations, new cheekbones. Sometimes you're a romantic anti-hero, sometimes a brutal war machine. Occasionally, you're both in the same scene. You'd probably roll your eyes at it all. But then again, you always did have a flair for the dramatic, and through it all, beneath the awards, the poems, the glittering armor and tragic fate, there's still that boy. That young boy dipped in a river. That boy taught to hunt by a centaur, who played the lyre better than anyone expected, who wore a dress to hide from destiny and still got caught. The boy who loved his friend more than he loved his life. Because for all your rage, your violence, your titles, what people remember most is the love. The bone-deep bond with Patroclus, the grief that bent you to the earth. The way your story became about him, as much as it ever was about war. Historians still argue whether Homer intended it that way. Whether your love was platonic, romantic, fraternal. But the truth, the real truth, is that no one mourned the way you mourned. And that kind of grief doesn't need a label. It just needs a heartbeat. In the end, what made you unforgettable wasn't your speed, or your sword, or even your heel. It was the way you made people feel. The soldiers who fought beside you felt invincible. The enemies who faced you felt fear. Patroclus felt safe. And now, millennia later, someone lying in bed, maybe yawning, maybe dreaming, feels the quiet echo of your story humming through the dark. Because you never really left, not with your name still on our lips. Not with your story etched into the spine of civilization. You were a hero, a tragedy, a cautionary tale. And somehow ... all of us. The underworld doesn't have clocks, but if it did, you imagine they'd tick a little slower for you. You paced the fields of asphodel, your armor long gone, your glory reduced to a shimmering memory that follows like mist. Some souls arrive with unfinished stories, and others with none at all. But you arrive with a legend trailing behind like a cape made of smoke. Even in death, you're too loud for the room. Sometimes, you catch yourself whispering battle cries you don't remember inventing. Some whisper, some argue, others hum songs they barely knew in life. Patroclus walks nearby, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. The two of you speak less now, not from distance, but from understanding. Words feel redundant when you've shared a battlefield, a tent, and a funeral pyre. The dead do not age, but they reflect. You replay choices, not just the bloody ones, the quiet ones. That moment when Briseis sat beside you and didn't speak. The night before your first battle, when Chiron placed a hand on your shoulder and said, "The greatest wounds aren't always visible." You laughed then, you're not laughing now. But the thing about being a legend is that you don't get to rest easily. People won't let you. You hear them sometimes, the living. Their prayers, their curses, their songs. When a soldier sharpens a blade and mutters your name for courage. When a poet scribbles your fate in the margins of a new manuscript. When a child dreams of being faster. And sometimes, just sometimes, a new soul finds you in the fields and stares like they've met a painting. They ask, were you really as great as they say? You smile without showing teeth. No, you say I was worse. That usually makes them think. But tonight, the air is different. The fall presses closer. Even the muted light from above seems dimmer. Something is shifting in the world above. And when the living stir with questions, the dead feel it in their bones, even the metaphorical ones. The murmurs begin with a name, Neoptolemus. Your son, yes, that's right. You had a son. Back when you were hiding on Skyros, pretending to be a girl and minding your own cross-dressed business, you managed to fall into something that resembled intimacy. Deidamia, one of King Lycomed's daughters, bore your child, a boy, Neoptolemus. You didn't know him well, but now his name reaches you in the underworld, carried on lips fresh from dying. He's at Troy now, fighting, and the Greeks say he fights like you, moves like you, kills like you. That should feel like pride. It doesn't. You're not sure what it feels like. Fringe with versions get wild here. Some claim Neoptolemus visits you spiritually before battle. Others say he dreams of you standing in your armor, pointing to Troy and whispering, "End it." The facts, of course, are anyone's guess. Historians still argue whether his battlefield fury is a legacy or a warning sign. Neoptolemus doesn't just fight. He finished the war. The wooden horse trick opens Troy's gates, but your son kicks them down. He enters the city with fire on his shoulders and vengeance on his blade. He kills Priam, the same Priam who once knelt and kissed your hands. He slaughters Hector's son, Astyanax, throwing the child from the walls, so he won't grow into a future threat. Yes, it's as horrific as it sounds. People wince when they tell the story. Even poets flinch. Neoptolemus becomes what you might have become if Patroclus had never steadied your hand. He's not just rage, he's wrath without music, fire without the lyre, and yet, he's yours. Some souls near you start whispering, asking what you think. But you don't answer, you can't. The feelings are too tangled. You can't decide if he's your echo or your shadow, your triumph or your guilt. Still, you follow his name like a thread. You listen to what they say about him in the world above. That he returns from Troy, that he refuses to sail home, that he travels north, maybe west, maybe nowhere at all. The stories fracture. Some say he becomes king. Others say he's killed during a temple dispute. One story says he tries to marry Hermione, yes, that Hermione, daughter of Helen, and gets cursed for it. The myths begin to unravel, the lines fray, and slowly, his name grows quiet. And once again, you are alone, the cycle turns. New heroes rise, new wars bloom, Your name lingers tattooed on scrolls, chiseled into stone, murmured by firelight. But the world is changing. The gods, too, start to vanish from the living world. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly. Like old music fading behind a closed door, but your story remains. Because the strange thing is, you never belong just to your time. You're timeless, a shape people recognize even if they've never read your name. The beautiful boy doomed by pride. The warrior made of gold and grief. The ghost who would give up eternity for one more breath of mortal air. And down here, in the soft hush of the underworld, you wait. You wait not for resurrection or revenge, but for someone to understand what you were actually fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, someone already has. The silence in the underworld doesn't feel empty. It feels crowded with things unsaid. You walk past souls who were once kings and cowards, men who lived by the sword, and those who died by accident. Some recognize you, some don't. Some just watch you pass and whisper about the light in your eyes that never quite went out. Every now and then, someone wants to challenge you. Achilles. They call, puffing up like they're about to make a name for themselves. You just stare, not with anger, with exhaustion. They back down. Because the rage is gone now, or mostly, buried under layers of ash and memory. But let's go back a bit, before all of this. Before death and drifting, back to that moment on the battlefield after Patroclus's body was carried away, after your oath of revenge, and just before Hector made his final mistake. The moment when you weren't just a warrior, but a force. That return to battle, the one people never stop retelling. It's not just the stuff of legend. It's the template, the prototype, the gold standard of fury. You don't fight like a man. You fight like a consequence. You don your new armor, forged by Hephaestus himself, and it glows like molten myth. The shield is its own universe, stars, cities, fields of war and peace carved in concentric rings. It's art, it's warning, it's your resume in bronze. And the myrmidons, they follow, of course. You don't even have to ask. You march to the front, hair tied back, eyes forward, and when you speak just a few words, low and slow they ready themselves, like wolves catching the scent. The battle opens like a wound, and for the first time in what feels like centuries, you feel alive again. You leap into the fray, not to reclaim honor, not to save the Greeks, not even to avenge a friend, though that fire still burns. You fight because it's the only language the world seems to understand. The first wave of Trojans breaks like water against your spear. You move like wind over stone. Spears glance off your armor. Swords bend around your limbs. You don't dodge, you anticipate. And when you strike, it's with the kind of weight that ripples through generations. At one point, you're surrounded by a dozen Trojan elites. You don't pause. You don't blink. You just lower your spear and give them the choice they didn't know they had: run or be remembered. Most choose poorly. You kill so many men that the gods start arguing again. Apollo grumbles that this is unnatural. Hera claps like she's watching theatre. Ares mutters something about professional jealousy. Athena smiles, which is somehow more terrifying than all the rest combined. Even the river Scamander, once again, tries to drown you out of sheer frustration. To many bodies, too much blood, you're polluting his banks, and rivers, apparently, have boundaries. He rises up, floods the field, swirls around your ankles with watery wrath. You fight the river. You curse the river. Hephaestus steps in, because fire beats water, apparently, and boils him back down to a stream. The elements are tired of your nonsense. But you press on, and then Hector appears. He's not foolish. He knows what's coming. He says goodbye to his family, his city, his gods. He ties on his armor with the gravity of someone writing their own ending. And then he walks to the gates. You don't hesitate. The chase is part theatre, part inevitability. Around the city 3 times, Hector panting, you gliding. The Trojans watching in stunned silence. And then Orthena steps in, tricks him, makes him stop, and then you end it. It's not clean. It's not noble. You drive the spear deep and fast. You don't give a speech. You just do what needs to be done. And when Hector falls, the silence feels louder than the battle ever did. You tie his body to your chariot. You drag him. 3 times around the city walls, a child somewhere in Troy cries. A mother collapses. A king breaks. You don't care. Not yet. This is what you told the world you'd do. You made a promise, and this is you keeping it. But later, when the anger fades, and the armor is cool, and you sit in your tent staring at Hector's mangled corpse, you start to feel it. The wrongness, the edge of cruelty cutting into your grief. And that's when Priam comes. Not with an army, not with threats, but with open hands and tears. He reminds you what it means to lose a son, what it means to be human. He doesn't beg, he simply is. And something inside you, some flicker of what Chiron once called the good part, reawakens. You wash Hector's body yourself, you return it, you feed the old king. And for one night, war holds its breath. You don't call it forgiveness, you wouldn't dare. But it's the closest you'll come. And after that, you're ready to die, not because you're finished, but because there's nothing left worth breaking. So here you are, spent, hollow, and still somehow standing. The fires of Troy flicker in the distance like sullen stars. The sea murmurs behind you, unbothered as ever. You've avenged Patroclus, buried Hector, and quieted your wrath, at least for now. But the war isn't done, not yet, and fate, that old, greasy trickster, has one last hand to play. You walk through the Greek camp like a statue come to life. Soldiers look at you with something that isn't a quite or any more like reverence edged with unease. You were a hero once, now you're something else. Something they can't name. Odysseus avoids your eyes. Agamemnon keeps his distance. Only the Myrmidons still move near you without flinching. Maybe they've gotten used to the burn. Days pass, or maybe just hours. Time in war slips sideways, and then it happens. A skirmish, one of many. A Trojan push, you're in the middle of it. Your blade still wet from battle, when you feel it. That tiny, traitorous sting. You'll heal, you stagger. It's not dramatic, not at first. It doesn't feel like destiny or doom. It feels like a wasp bite, a pinch, an insult. But then the pain spreads. Sharp, hot, wrong. You fall to one knee. The men around you shout. You try to stand. You can't. The arrow still sticks out from your ankle, trembling slightly with each heartbeat. Just above the place where Thetis's fingers once held you, decades and lifetimes ago. One dry spot, one soft spot. Paris looms in the distance, bow in hand. Smug, unarmored, probably thinking of new poems to write about this. Historians still argue whether it was Apollo guiding the shot, or sheer dumb luck. Either way, the arrow finds the mark. And just like that, the game ends, you collapse, finally. The Myrmidons reach you in time to see the light flickering behind your eyes. Some scream, some weep. One of them tries to yank the arrow out, only to realize the damage is already done. You're bleeding out from a single wound. After everything gods, monsters, Hector, Scamander himself, it's this that undoes you. A quiet little crack in your legend. The irony isn't lost on anyone. They carry you from the field. Your head rolls back, hair matted, breath shallow. The sky above spins, the sea murmurs again. You wonder if Thetis will come. She doesn't, not this time. You see Patroclus, maybe, or imagine him. His face is clearer than the sky. His hands steadier than memory. He says nothing, just watches. And then, silence. The Greeks go still. They burn your body in a pyre bigger than any before. It crackles and hisses, swallowing up your golden armor, your blood-stained tunic, the spear you once spun like a toy. The smoke rises into the night, and some swear it takes the shape of a lion mid-roar. The ashes are gathered, mixed with Patroclus's, as you asked. Your tomb is built by the Hellespont, where the water breaks against the stone like old applause. It's tall, gleaming, almost defiant. Ships pass it and slow their sails. Soldiers leave offerings. Poets sit nearby and mumble verses into the wind. And back in Troy, Paris dies, not long after, poisoned, shot, abandoned. His story shrinks beside yours. Helen returns to Sparta. The city burns. The Greeks sail home. Most of them regret it. But you become Achilles, not the man, the myth. The measuring stick, the name carved into every what if. Your mother weeps beneath the sea. Chiron sighs in some remote celestial cave. And the gods, those absentee landlords of destiny, fall quiet for a long, long time. You never got to grow old, never held a child in your arms, never heard Patroclus laugh again. But your story, your furious, tragic, bloody story survives. And people keep telling it, in scrolls, in songs, in whispers beneath the stars. You become the embodiment of glory and doom, of youth caught in a trap, of love turned to vengeance, of power undone by pride. People try to rewrite you. They try to soften your edges. They fail. Because you're more than a tale. You're a warning, a wish, a wisp of something eternal. A memory made of bronze and heartbreak. And somewhere just beyond where the living can reach you still stand, watching, waiting, a shadow in a golden helm. Your tomb stands quiet on the windswept edge of the world, but your name won't stay buried. The war is over. Troy is dust and memory. The gods have gone quiet, but the songs, they're just getting warmed up. Bards sling their lyres over sunburned shoulders, step into firelight, and begin with your name. Always your name, Achilles, son of Peleus, slayer of Hector, breaker of men. The words spread like a second heartbeat across centuries. They cross oceans, climb mountains, hitch rides on the backs of scrolls and whispers. Even as cities crumble and empires collapse, Achilles remains. You become part of the cultural bloodstream. And then, because history loves a remix, you start showing up in places you never visited. You're seen on old Roman coins, grinning like a marble thunderstorm. In Italy, they build statues of you, so lifelike they almost breathe. In Persia, scholars discuss your rage, if it were a political theory. Some medieval monks even try to Christianize you, claiming your wrath was a lesson, your downfall divine punishment. They dress you up in a metaphor, and hope no one notices the blood. Fringe historians have a field day with this. They argue that you never existed at all, that you're a mashup of forgotten warlords and poetic wish fulfillment. Others go the opposite route, claiming they've found your grave in every dusty hill from Anatolia to the south of France. One particularly optimistic professor once tried to carbon date a spearhead and claimed it belonged to Achilles himself. It didn't. but it made headlines. And then came Alexander. Young, brilliant, absolutely convinced he was you, reincarnated or spiritually adopted. He visits your tomb before marching east. He lays a wreath. He sacrifices. He whispers, "You and I, we are the same." And then he conquers half the known world. Your legend becomes a mirror for the ambitious, a badge for the reckless, a script for anyone desperate to carve their name into history's reluctant face. But there's always a cost. The Iliad fades, reemerges, gets translated, misquoted, recited in classrooms, where bored students draw mustaches in the margins. But it stays. You become a high school essay prompt, a myth in iambic pentameter, a screenwriting blueprint. People try to modernize you: leather jackets, motorcycles, tattoos with quotes that miss the point. Your heel becomes a brand, a weakness marketed as strength. You start to notice something strange from your seat in the underworld. The more people try to tell your story, the less they seem to understand it. They talk about the rage, the war, the glory. But they skip the grief, the tent, the liar. The long nights where you stared at the stars and wondered if it was worth it. You become an action figure, a video game character, a meme, and yet something of you always survives the delusion. Because buried beneath the explosions and fanfare, that core of who you were, the boy with one vulnerable spot, not just the heel, but the part of you that cared, the part that fell apart when Patroclus died. People forget that you cried, that you stopped eating, that you curled inward and tried to vanish under your own rage. They remember the dragging of Hector's body, but not the shaking of your hands when you returned it to Priam. They remember your speed, but not your silence. But just a few still see it, a quiet reader under a blanket, a tired professor translating Homer by lamplight, a teenager who finds your story and suddenly feels less alone in their anger, their confusion, their too big feelings and too small body. You reach them, not with your sword, but with your sorrow. Because that's the part that truly echoes. You never got your happy ending. Never got to grow old, see peace, live small. Your ending was written the moment Thetis held you by the ankle. That wasn't your choice, but the way you loved, the way you mourned, that was. And in the end, it mattered. Because centuries from now, long after the last temple crumbles and the last epic fades, someone will speak your name, because you killed a prince, but because you felt so much that it cracked the sky. Time doesn't work the same in the underworld. It stretches, folds, meanders. One moment you're standing at the edge of a field of asphodel. The next you're back beneath the olive trees on Mount Pelion, young again, fingers dusty from training, Chiron humming some old tune in the distance. Memory plays tricks down here. The mind conjures not just what happened, but what might have. The dinner you never had with your father, the words you didn't say to Briseis, the quiet nights with Patroclus that weren't enough, and would never be. Still, you drift. You're no longer burning with rage or tangled in fate. You're something quieter now, a relic with breath, a shadow with a past too loud to ignore. And then you hear something new, a commotion at the gates of Hades. It's not often the living come down here, but when they do, it stirs things up. Word spreads quickly among the shades. Odysseus is back. Yes, him again. This time he's not here for you specifically. He's collecting answers, chasing prophecies, probably outwitting a few underworld bouncers along the way. But he finds you. Of course he does. And what do you say? Not much. You stand tall, the way you always did. But your voice isn't the same. When Odysseus speaks to you, eager, clever, breathless from traveling, you don't boast, don't flex, don't remind him of how you once shattered armies like twigs. You say something simple, do not speak to me of glory. I would rather be a servant to a poor man on earth than king of all the dead. That sentence echoes through the underworld like a bell. Even now, historians argue over it. Was it regret, a philosophical bombshell? Just exhaustion? Fringe scholars claim it's a late addition to the epic, or a poetic flourish. But others, those who understand the weight of myth, know you meant it. Because for all the honor they heaped on you, all the songs and statues and sonnets, it wasn't enough. Not without life, not without love, you walk away from Odysseus after that. Back into the endless grey. The ghosts don't follow. They've heard enough. And you, well, you've said what needed saying. But in the world above, your voice sticks. Writers return to that quote again and again, printing it on posters, whispering it in lectures. Achilles, the godlike warrior, didn't want to be remembered. He wanted to be. You don't get to say much else in Homer's sequel. Just that one line, that one ache, but somehow it's more than all the blood and fire and prophecy. Meanwhile, the living keep trying to find you. A Roman emperor once built a shrine and claimed your spirit lived in the walls. An 18th century poet dreamed you visited him in the night and told him to stop using so many adjectives. He didn't listen. There is even a small town in modern Greece that claims to have been founded by your descendants. No one has the heart to correct them. Your name shows up in unexpected places. Achilles the racehorse, Achilles the coffee brand, Achilles the minor Marvel character. You're commercialized, rebranded, misquoted, and misunderstood, but it doesn't bother you anymore. Because here, in this slow, strange half-life, you've learned that being remembered is not the same as being known. You still walk the asphodel fields, sometimes alone, sometimes with Patroclus beside you, the two of you saying nothing, but saying everything. You listen to the new arrivals. You hear snatches of modernity, airplanes, explosions, neon lights, and you wonder what war looks like now. You wonder if boys still charge into battle with your name on their lips. You suspect they do. But one day, one quietly astonishing day, something different happens. Someone new arrives. A young soul, not a soldier, not a poet, just a dreamer. They don't flinch when they see you. They don't stammer your name like a magic spell. They sit beside you and ask, "Were you lonely?" You blink. It's a question no one ever asked before. And so you answer, yes. You say, but not always. You talk. 4 hours maybe. It's hard to measure. You speak not of war, but of music, not of Troy, but of Pelion. Not of killing, but of missing the little, quiet griefs that no one ever sings about. When they leave, whenever that is, you feel lighter. You realize something strange. You read not just a name carved into history's stone face. You're still changing, still reaching, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. The underworld stretches on, but you've stopped pacing. There's a rhythm now, not peace, exactly, but something like it. You wake, if that's what it is, to the same colorless sky, the same asphodel fields waving like forgotten dreams. Sometimes you find yourself humming fragments of old songs. Lyre strings you haven't touched in centuries still vibrate in your memory. It's strange, being a legend after the legend ends. There's nothing left to conquer, no more kings to defy, no more chariots to charge. No sand under your feet, no enemies to strike down. Just quiet, and your name echoing endlessly above. And still, they talk about you. The living can't help it. They love an unfinished story, and yours cut short at the height of glory, is like an open wound they keep pressing. Poets write alternate endings for you. Some say you survived, that the arrow only seemed fatal, that you fled the battlefield and lived out your days as a hermit near the Nile, growing old and peaceful with no armor, no war. Others claim you were taken by the gods, spirited away by Thetis to the White Island, where you still run barefoot along beaches lit by eternal dawn. Historians, of course, sigh at all this. They squint at what little evidence there is, if you can call vague ruins and scratched vases evidence, and shrug. We don't know, they admit. We'll never know, but the artists don't care. You become brushstrokes and marble, mosaics and monologues. In the Renaissance, painters frame your death as a ballet of light and motion, your final breath caught mid-lunge, framed like a saint. In the 19th century, sculptors favor the moment after, the body, collapsed, beautiful and terrible, with the arrow still embedded in your heel like punctuation. And always, always, the armor gleams brighter than anything else. Even in death, your presence is impossible to mute. You're the flame behind 1,000 war stories, the shadow under 1,000,000 comparisons. Coaches shout your name from the sidelines. Philosophers debate your choices in classrooms that smell like chalk and overthinking. Your name becomes an adjective, Achilles, describing anything beautiful, dangerous, and inevitably doomed. And yet, for all the noise, you never really speak again in the old tales. After your one line to Odysseus about preferring life over glory, you fall mostly silent in the epic tradition, as if the poets knew they couldn't top it, as if the gods, finally, had the decency to let you rest, but the legacy, it keeps stirring. Your tomb, whether real or imagined, is visited year after year. Pilgrims leave olive branches, soldiers leave coins. Once, a child left a toy sword and a note, for the brave one who died. You would have laughed at that, maybe cried, if you still could. Then, centuries later, a strange thing happens. The world starts talking about post-heroism, about the cost of glory, about the toll of violence, about the men who march off to war and come back half shadowed, half broken. Suddenly, people start seeing you not as a model, but a question. Was it worth it? All the blood, all the screaming, all the weeping mothers, unscorched cities and songs that end in smoke. For what? Your story, once an anthem, becomes an elegy. And somehow, that makes it more powerful, because now, when someone reads about Achilles, they don't just see a golden warrior. They see the boy underneath, the one who missed his friend, who loved deeply, who cried by the sea, who screamed at the gods, not because he was ungrateful, but because he still hoped they were listening. They see a hero who felt too much, and they remember that behind every statue is a man who once just wanted to live. A few modern poets even start writing in second person. You run, barefoot, one begins. You hold your breath before battle. You kneel by the water and see not your reflection, but the faces of the ones you've lost. You don't remember giving them permission, but you're glad they understand. And still you walk the underworld, slowly, silently, a shadow among shadows. But when you pass, others hush, not out of fear, but out of recognition. They see in you what they remember in themselves, the moment before the fall, the longing behind the pride, the ache beneath the armor. You are not forgotten, not because of the battles, but because of the pause before them, the breath before the scream, the silence after the song. You've become quiet now, less a figure than a presence. Not gone, not fully there, just enduring. Every so often, A soul drifting through the underworld slows beside you. They don't ask your name, they already know. Sometimes they want to sit beside you, silently. Sometimes they ask questions, sometimes they cry. You're used to it. Because that's the thing about being remembered, not as a face, not as a feat, but as a feeling. You're no longer just Achilles. You're the ache behind ambition, the ghost in the glory. Above, in the land of the living, the world shifts again. New wars rise, new stories unfold, but the myths, they cling. Schools still read the Iliad, still murmur the rhythm of ancient Greek. Some students lean in, others yawn. You don't mind. Even the ones who don't remember the lines still carry something with them. That sense of being too much for the world, of burning too brightly, of loving someone more than yourself and not knowing how to survive it. You are taught now, more often, with nuance. No longer just the hero in shining armor. You're discussed as a symbol of masculinity cracking at the edges, of grief so large it becomes thunder. You're used as a case study, a tragedy, a mirror. Fringe academics begin to argue whether your story is even heroic at all. They question if it's a warning in disguise. That maybe Achilles wasn't great because of what he did, but because of what he lost. His humanity, his softness, his friend. They even talk about your relationship with Patroclus now. Not as a footnote, but as a centerpiece. Some scholars argue, lovers, others, brothers. Some say, it doesn't matter. What matters is the depth of it, the rawness, the devotion. Because in the end, it wasn't war that moved you. It was love. And when that love was taken, you broke. Not in shame, not in cowardice, but in full, roaring collapse. That's the part no one can shake. The gods, they fade. Olympus goes quiet. People stop sacrificing goats in hopes of wine for their ships, but you remain. Maybe not as a name on an altar, but as a flicker in a story someone tells themselves when they feel like breaking. You've changed. You no longer want to fight. In the underworld, you begin to linger by the banks of Lethe, the river of forgetting. It's tempting. One sip and all of it fades. Troy, Patroclus, your heel, the tent, the chariot, the scream. You could be nameless, weightless, but you don't drink. Not yet, because something in you wants to remember. Even the pain, especially the pain. Because pain meant you felt, and feeling meant you lived. And for a man born to die young and shine brightly, memory might be the only kind of afterlife that matters. Sometimes, other heroes join you. Theseus, Ajax, Hector. You don't speak much. Just sit together like old men on a porch, watching eternity stroll by. You and Hector even nod now. An old and quiet truce, forged not by forgiveness, but by time. And then there's Patroclus, always nearby, not hovering, not haunting, just there. You've stopped counting how long it's been. The world up there spins faster now, flashing through empires, revolutions, satellites, electric lights. And still, somewhere in all that chaos, someone always finds you. A reader tracing your name with a fingertip. A dreamer whispering your lines into a cold pillow. A lonely kid who sees in you something they can't explain. And so, you remain. Not in war, not in wrath, but in recognition. You are every beautiful thing that knew it wouldn't last. Every furious flame that tried to touch the stars and knew it would burn. Every soul that ever whispered, "Let me be remembered." Let it mean something. And it did, because here you are, still being spoken of. Still walking in second-person stories. Still whispered by firelight. Still loved. Still feared. still Achilles. You don't feel the wind in the underworld, but you remember it, that salty sea breeze curling around your shoulders before the battle, ruffling your hair, lifting your cape. You remember how it sounded like distant applause, or maybe distant warning. It's quiet now, has been for a long time. You walk beside the river Lethe again, not to drink, but to listen. The water murmurs forgetfulness, gently brushing against the banks like it's trying to soothe you into surrender. You dip your fingers in. It's cold, almost kind. And for a moment, you think of letting go, but you don't, not yet. Because up there, someone's whispering your name again. In a lecture hall, maybe, or on a late night walk. A dreamer reading the Iliad for the first time, stumbling through the long, looping lines, suddenly struck by you. Not the hero, not the warrior, but the boy who lost his friend, and didn't he know how to go on. They see you, and the story starts again. You never asked for immortality. Thetis wanted it for you. The gods played their games. But you wanted to feel, to choose, to be. You wanted a world where friendship meant more than fate, where songs were played on lyres, not screamed through blood, but fate doesn't ask for consent, and songs don't wait for endings, so your story continues, in fragments, in translations, in teenagers scribbling your name on notebooks, in actors quoting you with trembling voices, in scholars arguing your intent like it still matters. And maybe it does, because you've become more than myth. You've become a vessel, a language people speak when they don't know how to say. I am broken and brave and hurting and still trying. That's your legacy, not the heel, not the rage, not even the kill count. It's the fact that even now, when the world forgets so much so quickly, it still can't quite forget you. They don't all know the details. Some think you fought dragons. Some think you are a god. Some remember your name only as a caution about weak spots. But that's okay, because the story lives. In quiet ways, in small echoes, in the way someone stares at the sea and thinks of loss, in the way a friend holds another's hand after grief and whispers, I'm here, you are here. Still, not in bronze, not in fire, but in them, in us, forever, Achilles. And now, the fires are fading, the last battle cry has fallen quiet, tucked between the lines of old verses, unforgotten prayers. The armor is rusting, the ships are still. The sand is smooth again, no longer stained by war, just holding the footprints of memory. You feel it, don't you, the soft unraveling of time. The way the story slows, breathes, and lets go. Let it go with you. Let your shoulders relax. Let the weight of shields and swords and grief slide away, like sea foam slipping back into the tide. You are not standing on a battlefield now. You are floating. You are safe. Achilles rests. So should you. Let the dust of Troy settle far behind your eyes. Let the smoke drift upward and vanish into starlight. Let the names fade, the myths fade, the sharp edges of destiny dull into something gentle. The underworld is quiet now. The river Lethe hums a lullaby. Patroclus waits, not ahead or behind, just beside. Always beside. And you are still. Breathe in and out. The story is told, the legend has softened, and sleep now is not a fall, but a return to warmth, to stillness, to peace. Good night, hero, your watch is over.